I've been living and working in Japan for years now, and I've talked before about how great playing games in Japanese is when you're trying to learn the language. But what about after the learning phase is over and you switch to just living with Japanese? You might be surprised because it's not all sunshine and rainbows. Hi, I'm Brandon, and it's actually been a good little while since I spent a significant amount of time playing a game in Japanese. Today, I want to start by talking about why I first started playing games in Japanese, why I stopped, and what got me interested in playing in Japanese again. This is the story of how I'm falling back in love with Japanese, and how my plan went perfectly without a single hitch. Not a single hitch. As with all things, I've had ups and downs with my motivation to play games in Japanese. I get up in the morning, I go outside, and there's Japanese everywhere. I get on a bus, Japanese everywhere. I go to work, Japanese everywhere. I check my mail, Japanese that goes straight into my trash can more often than not. I hate junk mail. When I was still in the learning phase, still using textbooks and going to Japanese class, or even just studying for the Japanese language proficiency test, playing games in Japanese was a fun bonus, a way to give everything else I was doing more tangible meaning. If I kept up my studies and worked hard, I'd be able to play and understand and therefore enjoy even more Japanese games. Then I moved to Japan for work. Suddenly, the tangible benefits aspect was covered by something other than games. Nearly everything else in my life relied heavily on Japanese. That soon came to replace a lot of the traditional studying I was doing, and I eventually even started playing more games in English than Japanese. There's no one simple answer as to why, but it was a combination of wanting a mental break from all the Japanese that filled every other part of my life, and a curiosity about how the English versions came out. The thing about moving to Japan after studying the language for years in a traditional learning setting is that I realized almost instantly that the highest level classes available at school were still only helping me build a foundation. By the time I moved, I was actually just getting started with my Japanese journey, and the transition was a little bumpy at times. There was so much I didn't know, and getting up to speed took some serious energy. I spent a good while mostly doing translation at work, and that got me curious about games translated from Japanese. I wanted to see what the English writing was like, and that turned out to be incredibly educational. In some cases, I could see the Japanese behind the English. In other words, it was a very direct, flavorless translation. Sometimes, that's all it needs. Sometimes it takes a little more pizzazz to achieve the same effect as the source material. I was recently reminded of a Japanese DS game I used to have. This is it. I'm not going to say the name of it because it is insanely long. Just look at all this text. The entire purpose of the game is to help you learn how to read and write kanji, the Chinese characters Japanese uses. Kanji are typically one of the most challenging aspects of learning Japanese for people. There are over 2,000 kanji in common use after all. That's a lot. I'm gonna just say it. I can't really write kanji anymore. There is so rarely a need to write by hand that I fell out of practice long ago and ended up forgetting a lot of it. Sure, I didn't forget everything, but it's a lot, and even if they're rare, there are occasions when I need to write things by hand, so having the ability is definitely nice. When I saw this particular kanji game for DS, it happened to hit in just the right way. I got excited to study, if you can believe it. Seriously, nothing against education. I think learning is great. And it's at its best when it's something I want to do rather than have to do. I ended up spending the next couple weeks looking for a copy of the enhanced version of that kanji game, and a 3DS to play it on.
Wait, hold up.
You bought a 3DS just to play a kanji game for the DS? Yes and no. I sort of fell down a great big DS and 3DS rabbit hole. I used to have a DS and a 3DS, and I have a lot of good memories with each. I started looking into their libraries again recently, and I found a lot of interesting games I never got around to trying. Suddenly, I had something I could explore. In Japanese. I love exploring areas of gaming I'm not that familiar with, and this started to feel like a project I could enjoy for a long time to come that would offer some fun study time. The 3DS plays both DS and 3DS games. Many of the games I'm interested in are not available on modern hardware, and I can grab used Japanese game copies. The thing about daily life, no matter where you live, is that it's not a very literary experience. People aren't walking around using more flowery, unusual words and sentence constructions. Interactions tend to be very functional. The cashiers at the convenience store say the same things every time. Would you like a bag? People at work are focused on accomplishing work, and our language reflects that. I apologize for bothering you when you're so busy, but I was hoping to discuss. And let's not forget about tax forms. Those are just dry torture. So even with all of my time spent living in Japan, I still have plenty of room left to learn and grow. There are tons of words I'm not familiar with, and it's never more obvious to me than when I'm dealing with more flowery language. Think about your favorite fantasy or sci-fi game aimed at an older audience, for instance. Do you think you're likely to see similar words in a textbook for learning Japanese or even at work? For most of us, the answer is probably not. The vocabulary in games like these is less utilitarian and more emotive, and that makes it a bundle of fun. It breathes life into study, and that makes study feel more like play. When you're busy having fun, all the extra exposure and new vocabulary just feels like the cherry on top instead of the sole purpose. I get the same excitement and wonder that I had when I first started learning Japanese, and that is a magical feeling that I want to capture as often as I can. My plan was foolproof. I was going to pick up a used 3DS and a nice stack of used games to expose myself to lots of new vocabulary. Nothing could go wrong. Almost immediately, reality set in, and I remembered that I hadn't bought physical games in literal years. It turns out that some 3DS games got expensive, like the same price as some new releases. And the 3DS itself? I guess I missed the window when they were more reasonably priced. I'm actually just assuming this window existed because it's kind of nuts these days. I'm not joking. I saw tons of 3DS listings going for as much as a brand new Switch. What? Both online and in person, the market's a little rough on the wallet these days. I actually started out by going to as many stores with used games as I could find, but the selection was either unimpressive or just out of my price range. I thought for sure in person would be the way to go, but nope, not this time at least. I eventually managed to find a 3DS for a price I could stomach. Barely. And that was online. One of the strangest things I noticed is that most in-store game prices were actually higher than what I could find online. Seriously, I never expected this. Maybe this just shows how little I understand the used games market, but this broke my brain. With all of this game hunting clearly not going to plan, it was a little demoralizing at times. I won't sugarcoat it. It had me a little bummed out. But then I realized something. All of this shopping around was yet another way to engage with the Japanese language, in a way I rarely had, if ever. I was scouring multiple websites, learning about their quality ranking systems, return policies, payment policies, shipping policies, and all that technical jazz. I learned a lot through the whole process, and while I found very few games for what I would consider jaw-dropping prices, I still managed to pick up some games that have inspired that excitement to learn I was seeking. This is a win. Even with our native languages, when it comes to language ability, there's always something new to learn. Giving myself the gift of exposure through something I'm passionate about is one of the kindest ways I know to push myself out of my comfort zone and into the growth zone. It's a relatively low-effort approach, and I love it. Have games ever helped you rediscover your love of something that matters to you? I'd love to hear about it in the comments. If you're curious about playing games in Japanese, I have a whole video about it that I think you'll like. Alright, go find some fun. Maybe in that growth zone I mentioned. Peace.